Hello and welcome to this tutorial, and in this tutorial we are going to learn something about the shared preferences. So shared preferences is nothing but it is a way of saving the user data or user settings on our application even if the user exits out of our application. So one way of storing the user data was by using databases, but a more efficient approach wherein you need to save a little bit of data from the user is by using shared preferences. So it is basically one of the most efficient way of storing user data or retaining user data even if the user exits out of our application. So for the sake of this tutorial, we have created a new project and we are actually going to have a field here for the username, wherein user is going to enter the username, and we are also going to have one more field for the password where the user is going to type in his password. And finally we have a button here which is called as save, which is going to save the information for us. And we are also going to have one more button here which is called as display, which is going to eventually display the contents which are stored in the username and password. And if we try to exit out of the application and if we return back, we still will be able to retrieve the data from the user. So let's go ahead and create the layout. So the first thing which we are going to need is we are going to need two large text, so one for the username and one for the password. So let's go ahead and go into text and let's change the text to username, as this is going to accept an username, and we go right here and paste the text view for password. So we change the text to password. So once we have it, the next thing which we do is that we have text fields. So we drag a plain text field here and let's give it a width of 200 pixels so that we could fit it properly. So let's say layout width is going to be 300 or let's say 200 dp. So we type 200 dp, and also we drag a plain text for the password and we do the same with this. So that width of this is going to be 200 dp as well. So as you could see, we now have two fields, one for the username and one for the password. Now it's better if we arrange it in this manner, it would look more proper. So this one for the username and this one for the password. So once we have our basic setup, the next thing which we do is that we go ahead and create two buttons here, one for adding the data so that the data would be stored, and the next one would be to display the data. So we go right here and select a button, drag it over here, drop it, and let's say this button is going to display the text as add. So we go to the text and change the text of the button to add, as this is going to add the shared preference. And let's go ahead and drag one more button, and let's say this button is going to display contents, or let's just name it as display. So once this is done, the next thing which we need to do is that we need to assign IDs to each of the edit text or the plain texts as well as these buttons. And we don't need to assign IDs to these texts actually, that is because we are not going to be changing them. So the first thing which we do is that we give IDs to these. So we select it, go to properties, select the property called ID, and as this is going to save the username, we are going to name it as username input. And now for the password, now it is going to ask us that update usages as well, click yes. And for the password field, let's name this as password input. So this has ID as password input and this has an ID as the username input. So once we have IDs, we also need to assign the IDs as well as on clicks for the button. So let's go ahead and give on clicks to this button, and IDs won't be as much important because we won't be referencing them in the Java code. So let's say the on click for add is going to be save info, as this is going to save info, and for display on click is going to be display data. Now for the add, let's say the S is not in capitals, that is because it is a method. It is better to save the method in camel case. So now once everything is set up, the next thing which we need to do is that we need to add one more text view here so as to display the contents which I entered here. So we select a large text, drag it and drop it over here, and as we are going to reference this in our Java code, we need to give an ID to this. So we go to properties, go to ID, and let's name this as my text. So once we have assigned IDs to each and everything, the next thing which we need to do is that we need to reference them inside the Java code. So we switch on to this main activity.java, we clean up the code. So once we clean up the code, we go ahead and create references to each of the text views and the edit text. So we type edit text and let's name it as user input, and we are going to copy the same for password. So we copy it, paste it here and change it to password input. And we also need a reference to text view, so we type text view and let's say the text view's name is my text. So this is basically the declaration, and now we need to get an actual reference. So we go inside on create and we type user input equals, as this is an edit text, we typecast it to edit text. Then we type in find view by ID r.id.username input. So we have a reference to username input. Now we need to have the reference to the password input. So we do the same for password input. So we type password input equals, typecast it to edit text. Then we type in find view by ID r.id.password input. Now the final reference we need to get is for the my text. So we type my text equals, and this is going to be a text view. So we type text view and then we type find view by ID r.id.myText, and it is showing us an error, and that is because we have declared this as texture view instead of text view. So make sure that you correct it. So this is text view, and as soon as we add that, the error is gone. So basically we have a reference to each and every text view which we need and each and every plain text which we need in this tutorial, and we have basically designed the layout in this tutorial, and in the next tutorial we'll be actually writing the Java code for handling the shared preferences. So thank you very much for watching this tutorial, and I'll see you guys in the next tutorial. Thank you. So whenever we click this button, we want something to happen. So what we basically want this button click to happen is return inside this on click. So if you switch on to properties and if you go to on click, this is the method right here which we want to execute on clicking this button. So now it's time to define this method, and we need to write in some code for this method so that whenever we click the button, preference should be stored. So we switch on to this main activity and we create the method right here. So we type public void, and as the method name is save info, we type save info, and to this we have the parameter as view. So once this is done, the next thing which we do is that we create an object for shared preferences. So we type shared preferences and let's name the object as shared pref. We type this equals get shared preferences, and this is nothing but a method to get the shared preferences. And to this we need to pass in a few things. First is going to be the name, and this name is going to be the name of the shared preferences. So let's name it as user info. As we are passing in the username and password, let's call it as user info. And then we type context dot mode, and we are passing it in a private mode. So make sure that you have the context as private mode. Now the next thing which we do is that we need to edit these shared preferences. So in order to edit the shared preferences, we need to create the shared preferences editor object. So we type shared preferences dot editor and we create the object for it and we call it as editor. We type this equals shared preferences dot edit, or this should be shared pref dot edit, and this should be equal to this shared pref right here dot edit, and this is actually going to make us able to edit the shared preferences. And inside the shared preferences we actually want to put in the strings which we have. So we type editor dot put strings to put strings into it, and we want to put the username. So we type username and we actually give it a name as username, and here we pass in the actual username. So we type user input, which is nothing but the username, dot get text to get the text, and finally we need to convert it into string, so we use toStrings method. And for the password we do the same thing, so we type editor dot put string, as we need to put password, and we name it as password, and we are naming it because we are going to need the same names while we are retrieving the data from the shared preferences. We also use here password input, which we have reference to right here. So this is basically the content which the user is going to type into the edit text. Then we type dot get text to get the text, and we need to convert it into a string before storing it, so we use the toString method. And finally we need to apply these changes to the editor, so we type editor dot apply, and it is going to make the changes to our shared preferences. Now in order to notify the user, or in order to inform the user that the changes have been saved, we need to make a toast, so we type toast dot make text, and inside make text, first parameter to be passed is going to be this. The next is going to be the message which we want to pass, so we type, let's say, saved, and then we need to mention the length of how long the toast is going to be displayed, so we type toast dot length long, and it is going to display the toast for a little bit longer period of time. Then finally we need to show the toast, that is pop up the toast, so we type dot show. So this method right here is basically for this button, which is going to add the shared preferences. Now we also need a method for this button which is going to display the shared preferences. So we go outside here and we create a new method, so we type public void, and you also need to check in the name for the on click of display. So if we go to properties and go on click, this right here, which is display data, is the name for the on click or the on click method. So we go here and we type in display data as the name of the method, and the structure of this is going to be same as the save info, so we type view, and inside it we just need a reference to the shared preferences and we just need to display it. So what we do is that instead of typing the code once again, we simply go here and we copy this line of code right here, which is actually going to get the shared preferences for us, and we go here and paste it. So once this is done, we just need to extract the string from the shared preferences and store it into a string so that we could display it. So we create a string variable, so we type string, and the first thing which we want to display is the name, so we type name, and inside the name we want to extract the name from the shared preference, so we type sharedpref dot get string, and get string is a method which is going to extract the string from the shared preferences. So the first thing which we want is the username, so we type username, and the next thing which we leave it as blank. Next thing which we want is the password, so for password we simply copy this, paste it, and make a few changes here. So this should be password, and to extract password we need to pass in password over here. So this basically is going to get the name and the password. Now the only thing which we need to do is that we need to display these two inside this large text right here. So in order to do that, we go here and then we type myText.setText, and we simply print out the name, then we type plus, then we give a little bit of space, then we again type a plus sign, and then we display the password, or instead of password you could just name it as PW or anything which you want. So once this is done, we are good to go. So we save the code and we run our application onto the emulator. So as you could see, our application is up and running on the emulator, and let's go ahead and type in some data into this. So let's say the username is AAA, and let's say the password is B and B. Now if we click add, it is going to show us a toast which says saved. Now in order to check if whether this data is actually displayed onto this onto the shared preference, we click on display, and when we click display, as you could see, the username as well as the password are displayed. Now let's say the user exits this app. In that case, let's see what happens. So if we exit this application now, and now this application is in our menu, so we open up the menu and the name of our application is shared pref. So we search for our application. So this thing right here is the shared pref. So actually I have two applications. So this is the application which we have worked with right now, and that is because this is shared preference and this is shared pref. So when we open it up and when we click display, as you could see, the shared preference has still stored the data for us, and we are still able to access the data. So that's how you use shared preferences, and I hope you guys understood why shared preferences are used and how to implement or how to use shared preferences in your application to store the data of the user inside the application. So thank you very much for watching this tutorial, and I'll see you guys in the next tutorial. Thank you.